Steve Hackett left Genesis in 1977. After founding member Anthony Phillips was in the band, he was the next big guitarist. He had some really big shoes to fill, but man, did he ever do a good job. And he went on to be one of the most prolific, actually the most prolific Genesis ex-member, releasing the most solo albums, quality stuff too. And a lot of Genesis fans went along with him because they loved what he did in the band. In this clip, some of our pieces from the last 8 interviews we've done with Steve Hackett, where he talks about leaving Genesis, his influence on the band, what he thought of it. Then there were 3, the first Genesis album without him, and a lot more on Rock History Music.
But the album is autobiographical. It's my life from beginning of a certain time, and then a rite of passage as things changed, joining a band called Genesis that no one ever heard of, and then leaving that because it claimed too claustrophobic. There's certain tracks that relate to the claustrophobia of being in a highly successful situation, but you don't have autonomy. You can't really experiment. You need permission to write songs and record. And I thought, no, I've outgrown this. I've outgrown the need for permission. I don't need that anymore. I need autonomy. I need to be the captain of my own ship, and I'll go down with it if necessary. But that's some of what went on. There are other controlling times, other controlling influences that I had to pull away from as well. So there's quite a lot of angst in the album, and also establishing Joe and I as a couple, as distinct from everything else that was going on with me. And there was a lot of opposition. It was very difficult. My previous wife was, there was Kim. There was she ended up marrying my manager, the guy that she brought in really to manage me. And life was very, 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 very difficult. All of that was very, very tricky, and I sometimes found myself in a minority. But I knew that I had to pull away. There was no doubt about it. We went through a tricky divorce, and but Joe was with me throughout all this, and has been such an incredible support. So. This is, part of what drove the album. Lots of things that I can't talk about, that I'm not allowed to talk about because of court agreements and what have you.
Okay, one quick one. Are you surprised?
Sure.
When you left Genesis, you had, there was a younger man who had all these ideas who wanted to express them. Now, looking back, Are you you think that younger man who left Genesis, that younger version of you, would have imagined all the roads? And man, you've had a lot of creative roads. You think he knew he had that many ideas in him? Looking back at that
younger
version?
So. No, I think I would have been extremely surprised that the work I've done, and again I have to bring in Jo. She said it's as if it's from rant to romance, from full rant to full romance. Full scream to the most delicate things, and so I wanted to attack music in a very broad way. And did I say Broadway? Give my regards.
Yeah. You had said before that Anthony Phillips was like one of the true writers of the band in the beginning.
Yes. Oh, yeah. He was. I think he was the main writer with the band and the main impetus behind them all working, very, very hard, and I think driving that team to do long practice sessions and everything.
Squonk was one of those songs that made me stop in my tracks. I remember when I first heard that, I remember going, what? That's them? That's kind of cool. What?
Yes.
That was like a rocker.
Well, it is a rocker, and the re-record, we recorded it one tone down. Yeah. So I've got a detuned guitar for that. But it's it's something that I've been playing throughout this year in order to celebrate, Seconds Out. So there's a revisit of a live album, a live album that originally it was on Trick of the Tail from 1976, and I do like the way it sounds. I think that there's something about that drum sound, and it is a rocker. It's pretty straight ahead. It was the part of the mainstreaming of Genesis. I think we were closer to the mainstream with that, to have something slow, and I think it was powerful live the way we used to do it.
Squonk was one of those songs that made me stop in my tracks. I remember when I first heard that, I remember going, what? That's them? That's kind of cool. What?
Yes.
That was like a rocker.
Well, it is a rocker, and the re-record, we recorded it one tone down. Yeah. So I've got a detuned guitar for that. But it's something that I've been playing throughout this year in order to celebrate, Seconds Out. So there's a revisit of a live album, a live album that originally it was on Trick of the Tail from 1976, and I do like the way it sounds. I think that there's something about that drum sound, and it is a rocker. It's pretty straight ahead. It was the part of the mainstreaming of Genesis. I think we were closer to the mainstream with that, to have something slow, and I think it was powerful live the way we used to do it.
I was listening just before we got on. I went back and I listened to, we talked about the new albums in our last two chats. But listening to your first three albums, my first thought was, were any of the songs from the first three albums, like Voyage of the Acolyte and Please Don't Touch, are any of those songs, were they songs that were brought to Genesis and somehow they didn't think it?
Yeah, some were. And there will be a certain amount of Genesis reject about them. But then the thing about Genesis was that if you stuck around long enough, you could represent the same idea, which had familiarity going for it. And sometimes last year's reject would be this year's hit, to quote I Know What I Like, for instance. I think you must always do that with the band. I think in any art, anyone who writes, anyone who does anything creative, maybe the best thing you can find in the I Ching, if we're going to quote the Chinese ancient sages, is the idea of work on that which has been spoiled. And art is perfect for that, because you can always repaint the same painting, you can always rewrite, re-record the same song. Unlike painting, of course, songwriters are required to perform that same song. So, here's a 50-year-old classic, or 51 years old in the case of musical box. Whereas a painter, generally speaking, is not required to recreate anything in particular. Rembrandt's greatest hits, and here it comes again. The Night Watch. It's funny how music develops in this way, where familiarity is part of the package. That's really what you have to do. You have to make, or each song has to make a friend of all of those potential listeners. It's each song, when it really works, it's like a world unto itself. And you think, there's nothing quite like this song. Whoever did it, there'll never be another Eleanor Rigby. No matter if you have Marcato strings and a sympathetic lyric, it still won't sound like that. You can't possibly. So you get something that's the epitome of the form. I guess epiphanal is the word. And luckily, I'm still making a noise for a living, and it feels wonderful to be playing in front of people again.
Did he contact you when you left Genesis, before or after?
I know. Well, we we talk, and we've got a birthday coming up soon, so I'm going to phone him up if he doesn't get to me first. And we wish each other happy birthday. Mine's on the 12th of Feb, and his is on the 13th. So we share the same certain things, the rising sign as well. So we both have that.
So you're an Aquarian.
Yeah, Aquarian. Yeah, you know, for all that means you're Aquarian too.
February 1st.
Oh, well,
yeah.
there we are. Yes. And so was Richie Havens. He was Aquarian. And so was our manager, Aquarian, and so was Phil Collins. So we had three guys who were Aquarian in that band with an Aquarian manager. Extraordinary. As there were three Taurians in King Crimson when it was John Wetton and Robert and Bill Bruford. Three Taurus, three Aquarians. What's going on here? You know, it's.
But did he get a hold of you, or when you decided to leave Genesis?
Yeah.
Did he say, "How's it going? You doing okay?" Were you guys in contact back then?
Yeah, I think we were from time to time, and I'm trying to remember what the order of events was. I mean, certainly very shortly afterwards, we had a Genesis reformation in the early 80s to help the state of Peter's finances, because he was heavily involved with WOMAD and it had lost a lot of money, although it was a great idea.
Although, is this a one-off show?
It was a one-off show that we had at Milton Keynes, and then I did another charity thing myself, and I asked Pete if he'd be involved, and then when Mike Rutherford heard that was happening, he said he'd like to be involved as well. So luckily, you know, we were able to do something that involved, you know, future members of Marillion and Genesis, and yeah, you know, to make that effort.
Was Steve Rothery part of that?
Not at that stage. I came to know Steve, you know, later on, and we're pals, and we do hang out together, and we've been threatening to do something together for quite some time.
I talked to him last week. He loves you, man. He loves you. That's all. I talked to him last week. He just loves you. He's
a brilliant player, and they put on a great show, Marillion, and I think they're getting better all the time, you know. So not everybody is winding down, you know. I know he's very proud of their new album. He was telling me that he feels it's really very good, and so I think, yeah, I suspect he's. I think he's onto a winner with that. But you know, he's a very nice guy, as you can tell, and again, very very modest, and his wife is named Jo as well. So you get the Steve and Jo show twice. You know, it's when we get together. She's very sweet, as is my Jo as well, and so yeah, you probably read that same article in Progressive Magazine, Prog Magazine, about. He's doing an interview and talking about, you know, our wives are chatting away on one side of the table, and there's the two of us. He said, talking about guitars and world domination. So, yeah.
What was the atmosphere like with The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway? What was that? I know that was the last one for Peter. What was that atmosphere like with that tour and recording that album?
Much more difficult. I think when a band starts to grow up and pull apart, that's always hard. You know, as soon as people are suddenly, there are wives, there are families, there are children. Suddenly, you know, the idea of doing what you did in your teens, which was the boys' club, suddenly, you know, it's necessary that there's an invasion of you know, the outer limits of life coming to bear on it. Everyone's got to grow up sometime, and bands do have fault lines right down the middle. You know, we all want to be the Musketeers and go all for one and one for all. Yeah, well, what about my wife and children? You know, so I think that was much more difficult. You know, Pete Peter Gabriel had pressures at that time. It was a difficult birth, and so he was diving between London and Headley Grange. It was tricky, and he was really working in one room, and the band was working in another. Yes, we came together, of course. You know, it turned into a double album. There are those who say it may have been stronger as a single album, but then again, what would you leave on and what would you leave off? It is what it is, and if anyone wants to, you know, have their favourites, fine. I mean, its high points are exquisitely beautiful. The other aspects to it, I think, there's a claustrophobic feeling that I get when I listen to it. When I listen to it in its entirety, but I love the individual parts that go with it. And here's me thinking, of course, you know, densely packed lyrics. Pete's trying to get the story over. Densely packed keyboard parts. You know, the irresistible force meets the immovable object, and there's this huge collision. If collision was ever used to describe one piece of music, it would be this one. Different schools of thought, individuals, you know, pulling in different directions. Funnily enough, we've been mixing the title track, Landmass Down Broadway itself, which I think is a great piece of work instrumentally. Nowhere to run, nowhere for the guitar to move on it at all. You know, just to colour it slightly. But there's something very, very beautiful about it. It's unique, isn't it? You know, it's got that sort of the antique quality and the kind of, oh, I don't know, not quite the sacred and the profane of Devil's Cathedral, but the aspect of the drawing room keyboard sound meets the steampunk of Pete on that. It's different worlds, or proto-punk, I ought to say, perhaps, because, you know, the idea of rail as a punk, and it wasn't Genesis that invented punks, and it wasn't the Sex Pistols. The word punk appears in Shakespeare, and you look it up in the dictionary, and it means a rubbishy person. Here you are. But you know, that album had aspects of that, so it's a kind of highly decorated album.
Would you do it live when it's?
Would I personally do it live? I think that I would probably leave it to others to do live. I know that other people have done it live. I took it around the world myself, first time out, and for me, there are some guitar moments on it which are lovely, but I feel in the main, its predecessor and successors had more room for the guitar to move. As I say, it was very hard to get a look in through the lyrics and vocals and the keyboards, very densely packed. What do you do? I can't play a guitar solo over that, just can't do it. But I could do it on Fly on a Windshield and parts of the Lamia, which are very beautiful. It's those Genesis changes, you know, those lead chords that the band were capable of producing. That kind of, you know, orchestral spirit, yeah, that's part and parcel of, you know, what we now think of as prog.
When you heard it, and then there were three. What was your reaction when? Because I mean, I ask members all the time when they leave a band, "Did you listen to the next album?" But did you wait to listen to it? When did you hear it first?
Tony Smith played it to me, funnily enough, and I heard it, and I thought, well, you know, that's what they sound like without me. It's a three-piece. There was another three-piece that I was hearing around about the same time, which was Mike Rutherford with Small Creeps Day. And I felt that in terms of production, Small Creeps Day and the drum sound with Simon Phillips I complimented him on that. He thought the drum sound was ruined compared to what it was at first. But for my money, I thought in terms of production, it sounded really good.
He told me the same thing.
So I was more drawn to that. Who said that?
Simon Phillips told me the same thing.
He didn't like the production, didn't like the drum sound. But what did you think about the drum sound?
Well, that's one of my favorite albums of all time.
There you go, see?
I've interviewed everyone but Mike about that album that were on there. Noel, I'm interviewing him in a couple of weeks. I've interviewed him multiple times. But you know what? Yes. When you said that last time in the last interview, yes. You wouldn't believe the reaction we got. That I said, of all the Genesis solo albums, if you can't count your own, people just react. They were so pleasantly surprised that you said Small Creeps Day.
Oh, yes. No. Well, the thing is, there's something important about this. If I can remember what I was just thinking, the audience are the true owners. You see, you liked it. Presumably, you liked the drum sound as the drummer. You weren't involved. I liked the drum sound. I liked Noel McCullough's voice. I liked the approach. It worked for me. Whenever I ask anyone who made the album, they'll tell me what's wrong with it. Who are the true owners? Isn't that so often the case? And it's so often the case when it's a live gig where a band will think they've just played a terrible set and the audience have been in heaven watching it. So, yeah, the audience
are the true owners. That's so cool. That is so cool. So.
Well, you know, I've had a lot of time to think about this, about who owns the music. Those who have it in their heart, not those who produced it from their head.
Do you think it keeps you young? Because, I mean, if I was in your position, and I think I've told you a few times, when I do my work, I'm 62 now, and I'm working harder, but more smarter, enjoying what I'm doing. I'm more conscious of what I'm doing. Bill Bruford told me his best years were in his 60s, and I know you've worked with Bill, but how do you feel? Right. How do you look at your career at your age? And you seem to be on top of your game.
Well, I like getting things right, but I also like surprising myself, and little bits of equipment absolutely thrill me when the sound is right. So the sound is right, and I'm revisiting, for instance, Camino Royale, which is a track that was on Highly Strung. And there was something that happened on the original, which had attitude, but I was never able to get the sound right with the original equipment live. And so I realized what I've got different is slacker strings, and I'm doing wider vibrato on it so that each note does something. And I think, it's this. There's a subtle shift in what I do. You know, it's not just about speed, and I can do speed, whereas I couldn't at one time quite in the way that I wanted to be able to do. If I wanted to keep blistering, I can just about do that, you know. But sometimes you do. Yes, sometimes you don't want to hold back. We went through Camino Royale, and we were doing it, and I thought it's a bit too jazzy, and I said, I don't think it needs a breakdown section in the middle. I think we just need to keep up the energy the whole time, and salvos, and keep it coming so that you don't have time to draw breath, really. And it worked much better. Everyone thought, it's got all that stuff that we want. Something that the Knife has, for instance. You know, it doesn't really draw breath very much. It's got a little quiet section in the middle that's a little bit questionable of its time, but hey, you know, it's like, okay, pause for breath before the next onslaught, really.
Well, is it work, though, to you? Because I look at what I do as, for the first time in the last 5 years, I do what I do, and I don't really I'm kind of enjoying myself. Well, how do you look at it? Is it work, or is it sometimes work? How do you look at it?
I think it's only work when it's going wrong. You know, I think that when it's catching fire, you think, oh yeah, I'm so proud of this. I'm so proud of all the material. You know, we did Ace of Wands. We're thinking of starting with Ace of Wands. And the band take it, and the original is recorded really, really fast. And we started to do it live years ago, slower. But actually, I was doing it with Jarbi, the Hungarian band, in a couple of weeks ago, and they took it at the original pace. And I thought, this actually suits it. It gives it something extraordinary. Again, you know, you're not pausing for breath. So it's this kind of, oh my God, what's going on? How is that possible? That aspect of bam, 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 bam. There was an expression, funny enough, that the late great Ian MacDonald used, a band that can turn on a dime, that aspect of, that's it, isn't it? Pirouetting on a needlehead in a way, so that there's a change, there's a change, there's a change, there's a moment of silence. Where's this coming from? Bam, bam, bam. And so the ideal way to receive all of this is, I haven't ever heard a note that this guy or his band did ever before. And if you come to it with newness, without any idea of what you're going to receive, that's it. Will we ever get virgin audiences at my age? Perhaps not. But on the other hand, it's great not to have to slog up through the clubs again and do all of that, even though there were some great moments that happened there. But part of being known is you can be more experienced, you can be better at what you do, and I like to think I am. You can't be a new face on the block. You can't be a new kid on the block. That isn't there. But you get something else, which is, you realize that a lot of other players were influenced by things that I did, and not exactly dismissed, but marginalized. And that informed their playing. And you realize that, one famous guitarist will say, oh, I like the harmony playing that you did on so-and-so, which is why I did that. And another guy will go, well, liked tapping, and I decided to make that, pretty much my raison d'etre. And it's part of what it's all about, isn't it? But I think the voyage of discovery goes on all the time, within yourself, with others, refining and getting better at it, and just being able to go, all sorts of things that I wish I could have done at one time. You just hear something, you just think, how is that possible? Miracles, but they're built very slowly. Miracles don't happen overnight, do they? You must know that as a drummer, with technique, where those things that seem absolutely stunning, you'll think, oh well, achievements seem so little in retrospect.
Remember, if you want to subscribe to the channel, we would love that. Make sure you click the bell notification so you'll be told when we have a new video. We hope this works, because we have 139,000 subscribers now, and not everyone is told when we release a new video. If you want to make a donation to the channel, there's a PayPal link at the very top of the description. You can also join our Patreon. You'll get early access to a lot of our interviews. And you can buy a t-shirt or a cap or a coat at our swag store. All the things you need are right at the top of the description. And remember, watch our older videos. If you really want to support the channel, start exploring on rock history music. Start seeing what we've done in the past. Just scroll down and check out our other interviews. There are thousands on this channel. I'm John Bowden. Take care of yourself.